is John Wright, reporting live in the Midwest Civil Unrest. Working within the truth movement and the activist movement, I came across local filmmakers that are working on a project called Gray State. The Gray State is the pre-apocalyptic collapse of the United States, the epic Orwellian nightmare.
It's rolling. Here we go. Bring the rain. Action! Go, go, go!
What inspired them to do research and to do a controversial movie like Gray State to educate people as well as inform them what will be happening and what to expect. So I'm very honored to be sitting next to these people as they have put their livelihoods and their potential future careers on the line for such a controversial movie. I'm sitting here with filmmakers that are working on one of the biggest projects of this year. They're going to be calling this the Gray State. So let's talk to these guys and see what this project's all about. So I'm sitting here right now with David Crowley and Danny Mason, star of Gray State. So can you guys please tell me, what is the Gray State?
Thank you, Sean. Good to be on your show. The Gray State essentially is, like you said, what happens after the police state. So we all recognize these trends that happen day to day, the loss of liberty that we kind of just gloss over because there's something better on TV. What you have to look at is what happens after these trends go unchecked. So if no one steps in to prevent these things, I mean, bringing the issues to the light, like what Ron Paul's campaign is doing, or what these other patriots like Alex Jones are doing, is they're bringing to light these very real issues that if they go unchecked, they create what we're kind of terming as the Gray State, which is the dystopian reality that we can look at that's essentially possible, is laid out in 1984. You know, it's this Orwellian state.
We've got Leon Panetta coming out talking about he doesn't need the authorization of Congress to even pass wars anymore. He basically needs the Agenda 21 and the United Nations to say that NATO can give him approval to go in and invade other countries. So this is what's increasing about the police state. So we need to learn more about what the post-police state is going to be for the citizens of our country. So thank God we've got filmmakers like these guys putting together their efforts to come through with what they're trying to get portrayed in this message. Sadly, we'd like to see if we can get this movie out before these events are happening live in our own neighborhoods. So basically, what is the timeline of your release for this film?
We're looking at releasing the marketing campaign. So far we've been working on just a concept trailer, basically shooting scenes that we feel are representative of these trends, such as mandatory RFID, or you know, how the Department of Education is becoming more and more involved federalizing education, making it more workforce training than actual education. And you know, it's things like that, like what you said about Panetta, basically the violation of the War Powers Act. So the government just acting outside of the best interest of the people of the United States. And what we're attempting to do with Gray State is essentially show the consequences of these things when they're uncorrected. So if the people do not exercise their rights at this time, the rights are taken away. Soon this Gray State will exist, and they'll be powerless to stop it, except through revolution, which is of course something we don't really want. We want a revolution of the mind, not of you know, the musket. So to answer your question, we put together this marketing campaign and this trailer. And what we hope to do is sort of sell the idea of the Gray State, make it not marketable, but sort of something that people can grasp. Because we all know that people are more willing to watch TV, to watch a movie, than to tune in to the news and discover what's wrong with their world, because it's an uncomfortable reality that they don't want to deal with. So what we're trying to do is, this is our Trojan horse, getting into mainstream media, presenting these issues to people who would otherwise have tuned out long ago. So our projected release is early August. And what we'll do is we'll try to continue to advertise through grassroots marketing and social networking, and eventually by the RNC we'll attempt to go public.
So is this film tuned in more for the truther audience that already understands pretty much what's going on and the global elites taking power from individual thoughts and freedoms, or is this something that anybody on any research level can understand?
Well, if I can answer that one. What we have is a film is a piece of art. What it is not is propaganda. So what I will not do is make a movie that panders to one specific group's. It's like a Christian movie. I mean, a Christian movie can be well-intentioned and everything, but it's only going to appeal to Christian people who are already watching the movie anyway. It's not going to convince anyone. So what I'm not going to do is make a movie about the truth movement. However, art imitates life, as they say. So the truthers will certainly find grounds to follow this film, and they'll definitely attach to its concepts.
And I think going off what David said, going into the project, we both talked about it being a character-driven piece, and that all the different variations would be represented through the characters and stuff. So
It is feature film.
Yeah.
You know, it's not propaganda. It's not about what is going on in the world. Those things are in the movie as the background context, essentially. But the A story is essentially, it's a human story because that is the film you want to see.
People might be questioning that this could actually be a reality. That more, you know, in the mainstream eye, they might not see this as something they can actually conceptually grasp. So is there going to be some sort of educational period within this movie? Is there, you know, can I get some more of the concepts here, what you're working on?
Like I said, Gray State is about showing the consequences, and they are essentially real consequences. So if people can read into what they're seeing and say, hey, wait, I recognize that in real life. I'm going to go ahead and do my own research and look into it. That is just an added benefit. That is not our intent. If they do that, great, because we do believe in things that Gray State is about. And but what we're not going to do is try to convince people, you know, because that's, like I said, propaganda.
It's not our job, and we don't want to hit the audience or the viewers over the head with it, because then it's just too much and they'll just be closed off to it. But if we can represent it through symbolism and character arcs, then we've done our job. Like we said, we both subscribe to a lot of the main themes into it.
We're artists, not politicians.
Yeah.
Well, like some past movies, like V for Vendetta has kind of put a face in front of the protest movement idea. Do you think that this Gray State concept, Gray State movie, could put forth its own type of movement?
Well, hopefully, the Gray State term itself will identify the weather outside. You know, the things that we're looking at happening. Hopefully, that will become a term that can be used. Like, the Gray State is coming. Let's stop this from happening. Otherwise, we're looking at a Gray State. As far as the symbolism, we can only hope to achieve something that's that iconic, like the Guy Fawkes mask, for example, or the Resistance fist. We'll try, but we'll see how much it catches on.
Yeah, and just for us, this is doing our job, like everybody else should be doing their job. So, if it gets to that level, that's great, but we just want to get that information, just truth out there. And this is how we feel the truth is, in our own artistic interpretation.
Art is a statement of truth, essentially. It'll resonate differently with anyone who sees it, but hopefully they'll get something out of it.
Nowadays, more of the mainstream kind of guidelines, like the Hunger Games, is turning into a big phenomenon. Do you feel that this, ultimately could turn into the same type of phenomenon that could be ultimately viral worldwide?
I haven't seen Hunger Games yet, but I have heard about it, and to me, it resonates very strongly as Agenda 21 preparation. Whether that's intentional or not, I can only speculate. I'm not going to say anything as fact that I don't know as fact, but from what I've heard about that movie, essentially it is preparation, and we know that occurs with a society as dumbed down as the one we live in. They're susceptible to conditioning. So yeah, a lot of films are just preparing people for the idea, like Contagion was another good one. A disease comes down, simply wait for the government solution, and everything will be okay.
There's a lot of reports too about the new GMO foods, everything else that's going out. They're poisoning all of our foods, brain damming us down to where we don't have any type of free thinking abilities anymore. Everything pushed through the mainstream is built to take away your ability to free think, from the programming on television to the commercials, now through all of our internet searching. Every single thing that we do is all for sale. So we're all just these little corporations they want to grasp into. So that's the propaganda media that is using everything they can psychologically to get your attention, make you go purchase a product. That's sales marketing. Also, I would like to ask you guys as well, what's some of the research you guys have done for this upcoming police state?
Go ahead, Danny.
Whoa, a lot. I've been doing a lot of, I would say, 5-6 years of just intense research and dealing with conspiracy theories, but actually looking from where the theories separate to actual fact on it, and looking what resonates as actual, truth behind that. And it came to a point where it's just like, it's so in the forefront of the media and how people just at this point don't actually have like their own thoughts or opinions on it, that it's the best term zombie, really, to it, and where they will be discussing about a topic, but you can tell there's no passion. Once you have that passion behind it, then you have emotions and feelings and actual critical thinking. And that's slowly being diluted through, like what David said about the educational system. And presenting David and Mitch with an information and stuff, and I remember presenting to him just like, you're gonna think I'm crazy, but just do me a favor, do not believe me, and that's my biggest disclaimer, do not believe me, just do the research on yourself. Because that's how people should be, but most of the time they're like, oh, this is crap. You're a crazy, nut. And I'll ask for people, and same thing with David, just do the research, that's it. And then, provide your own information, your own opinion on it, and that's it. If you believe it, cool. If not, I totally understand. At least you're making the effort into it. where it's just like you're not believing everything that's being pumped down you through the corporations and through the media, and just through Hollywood and stuff, because that's like the big norm of what sets the values and ethics within people, and they have no idea and don't realize it.
So yeah, like Danny said, that was the best thing he did, was taking that impartial approach to saying, go do the research yourself, which is exactly what I did. And of course, once you go down that road, you can't come back. It's like when you're arguing with someone, if you attack them and say you're wrong because of this, what they're going to do is they're going to rally around that idea and protect it. So they're not going to listen to you. So doing that, having that approach, which is the approach I'm trying to simulate in Gray State itself, is presenting an idea so people can appreciate it or not. But what I'm not going to do is ram it down their throats. This is true. And the stuff I believe and the stuff I've read into, I'm not going to force that on people, because in the end they're not going to listen anyway, unless they're doing their own research. But this does kind of tap into what the Gray State is essentially about, because once you start doing this research, you start looking into this stuff yourself, and you kind of realize, well, this reality that I'm living in is not necessarily real. It doesn't represent most of the human experience worldwide, and it certainly doesn't represent what we're capable of, or where we should consider progress to lie. Like why is progress measured financially and technologically? I mean, when spiritually we're dead. So it's essentially the Gray State is in one reality you have black, in one reality you have white. Either you're like the truth movement and you're totally into this stuff and it dominates your life, or it doesn't, and there's that divide. But what we're finding today is that the veil between these realities is ever growing thinner, right? So to exist in one or the other implies, especially the side where you're going to side with the media and what you're told, doing what you're told without a thought. That is the side that is now having to prove itself. I mean, it's no longer the conspirator or the conspiracy theorists who have to prove themselves, because everything is so out in the open now. So the Gray State is essentially the area in between black and white, where these things have to mix, and you have to kind of choose sides, and you have to kind of develop your own opinions and decide what action needs to be taken from there.
And going off of what David just said, I think the biggest thing when he's talking about the whole entire being spiritually dead, that's so true, because once you project with people and they don't have that critical reasoning, then spiritually becoming in tune, that they won't be at all. And we do, essence, it's just be able to not force people, just like you said, present the truth on it, because truth is the truth and it will never die. You can't destroy truth, okay, no matter what you do. And the way things are swinging, you're seeing like what David said about the one side, they are scrambling to try to prove themselves, and there's so much more in the open now than how it was before, like even like a year ago, really. Even 2 years ago. It's insane.
Gray State used to be prophetic. When we shot the trailer last summer, it was a prophecy. Now most of that stuff is common knowledge.
Which is crazy. And all the stuff that we put into the concept, we were like, we really hope this isn't happening. And a lot of stuff that we put in there is happening. It is in the forefront, and it's being reaffirmed by like Occupy Wall Street and the riot police. And also the larger case of the military state through the NDAA. I mean, a lot of people say it's not, and we even joked about that. We talked about a bill being passed, and we're looking through our notes and stuff, and it actually did, and we were just like, that's just, not saying we're being prophet, but we're able to see the trends happening, and a lot more aware than most people are, just because of going down what people say the rabbit hole, and never returning about that. But there is this point that it's like allowing the audience to really dive into it and the critical reasoning. If we can get them and start questioning their own lives and looking at it from a different perspective, then we've done our job to present our truth, and that's the biggest thing, and that's all we want.
We have been chasing reality. I mean, no, it actually, literally, as I'm writing the script, it used to be about, here's something that's real, wake up and appreciate it. Now it's more like, well, they already know that, and so I have to go beyond that. What's the next step? So I think it's a very pivotal year for Gray State to actually emerge, because these things have been brought to light, and people are aware of them. And it's essential that we capitalize on this and move now while what's the term? Make hay while the sun shines.
Well, to coin the term, red pill, that's where people go through life, the term I like to use, once you finally accept that the illusion of mainstream media and the illusion of which we're told through our childhood and through our parents' childhood, all the way up to where we're just told to believe what's on the news and don't ask questions, do what you're told. Just be a obedient servant to the state. That's pretty much the indoctrination from childbirth. And if you act up, start free thinking, or start, not following plans or protocols, and they dumb you down with prescription pills, talk your parents into it, say it's best for you. So I'd like to ask you too, when was it that you finally accepted and took the red pill?
I would say, well, for Danny, obviously it was several years prior, but as soon as we had a meeting and he showed me some things, he's like, this is stage 1, this is stage 2. This is what's going to happen. And I'm like, well, that's interesting. If you say it's true, I'll go look into it. And it was essentially when I went home. And that night, it was a sleepless night, I took the red pill. And so that would have been November of 2010?
Yeah, 2010. And I can't speak for David, but there's still times where I still,
Want to be proven wrong that this
well,
can't be the reality?
yeah,
Please
exactly.
prove us
yeah,
wrong,
please.
please.
And that's the other thing where I get into discussions with people and they just start, they'll attack you personally of what you believe, and then that's when I can just take a step back and just like, everything's gonna happen. Like I don't have to like project onto you. So, and I've had people when I said stuff, you're crazy, and they come back, you're like, you know what? You're not really that crazy because of stuff that's really happening. So. But sometimes you want it to be wrong. You totally do. You do not want this reality to really come true.
No one wants this.
No, nobody at all. It's slavery. It's terrible. To where I struggle with my own reality on that. To where it's simple questions of life. What are you going to do? How are you going to, family stuff and everything. And it's tough. I mean, it really is.
It's almost like a question of religion. If we try to attack someone's, essentially their religion, their reality that they believe in, it's immediate knee-jerk denial every time because they are conditioned. It's so ingrained in their reality and their self-perception, how they view the world, that to attack it is to attack the fiber of their reality. So essentially, you can't do that. You can't convince someone that way. They can't wake up that way. They have to experience it themselves. Mm-hmm. It has to be like a spiritual experience, like an awakening, because it's certainly a different reality than what they're trained to do, or they're trained to believe.
I totally agree with him. I think the best thing that happened to me was being raised Catholic. And when I know you're laughing, right? Because being a Catholic, you question it. You don't question it whatsoever. Right. As a young kid, that's just like, it didn't make sense whatsoever.
And then think for yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And then with the public schooling system, you don't question the teacher. Teacher's always right. It wasn't until I started really getting into martial arts where it's like, no, you have a different approach to it, you have a different opinion to it. It's not wrong, it's not right, it is truth for you. And that's the biggest thing.
It's the essence of free thought.
Yes.
Which is why, people say a lot against, for example, Lord Christopher Monckton, because he is not a scientist. But that doesn't say anything about the truth or untruth of what he says. Take his argument. I have the right to decide what goes into my body, food, GMO, vaccine, whatever. I don't have to be a scientist to prove to you that I don't want it. You attack my argument. I'm a free-thinking person. I can project this idea and attack that idea, and if you can disprove it, scientifically or objectively or whatever, that's a different story. But what you can't say is that I'm not qualified to make my own decisions.
And that's just really underestimating the people in the public. And I think it's at a point where people are craving and urging for truth because they can't turn to the government now and even to the media because everything's hogwash on the same time. So there's a very large movement beginning in it's going to boil over. And what we don't want it to is just boil over to violence and civil war aspects. That's what they want. That's what they're trying to do. Because then they'll come in, they'll clamp down, which is i.e. gray state.
And that's something gray state is actually about, the storyline, is that, yeah, you can address these issues and you can fight them. Sure, we have 300-some million firearms in the U.S. that we can use, sure. But do we want that? Do you think in this day and age that our nation can survive a post-revolution world? Can we survive the revolution itself? These are questions, So we have to utilize our rights now while we still have peaceful rights to exercise, and we can peacefully do grassroots reform, put our politicians into office to enact a change that represents us, and do this way instead of a revolution, because I personally don't think that a revolution is justified by any means, a violent revolution.
I completely agree. 100%, and we're not advocating that whatsoever.
Not in the least.
And the biggest thing, you have these people who they've been bred, they've been conditioned to be dependent on the system by living within the cities and stuff, to simple things of not even being able to grow their own garden or even research the food that they're intaking. So when something like this happens, they're going to be scrambling. What is it, 3 days they'll steal for food, within a week they'll kill for it? And
That's your accountant down the street who will do that.
And you're talking, like, yeah, people pushing papers, lawyers, and we're talking like 3 million within a city.
300 million people in the U.S. who have entirely useless careers and no skill sets that are of any value if this rug is swept out from underneath them.
So they couldn't go out and build a house. They couldn't go out.
Where are they going to go out?
Yeah.
If they go anywhere, they're going to be shot by the people who got there first of all. If they do get there, they are not going to have, people are a bunch of isolationists. We've been conditioned, like the rugged individual is going to get out there and he's going to, with his gun, he's going to forge his way into the wilderness. He's going to, bring about the justice and the reform that he wants. But no, I mean, we're totally bred away from community. It's communities that will survive. It's tribalism. And we as individuals have no skill set that will allow our very survival in this scenario.
And if you might get lucky, find a piece of land at the same time, that the atmosphere and the soil has been contaminated so much, people don't know how to clean it. People do not know how to properly fertilize it at the same time. So if you get there, boom, you have another roadblock you have to. So it's absolutely amazing. I think that was one of the biggest eye-opening experiences, what David has taught me in his experience of growing up, because they're very different. It's really taught me to really kind of be like self-sufficient and self-reliant, but also be a provider for oneself, coming to it and what you bring in as within a tribe. And we've had discussions about that. With individual, it's go into that situation. You're going to bring an accountant? What's he going to do?
Back to free thinking. Free thinking is the idea of being able to make decisions on your own without being influenced and just accepting somebody else's truths as being real, questioning everything until you have your own defined ideas. Most of the people in the truth movement who are free thinkers, who have gotten to that point, in my opinion, mostly have had a direct altercation with either law enforcement or had something in their life happen to where it was just so overwhelming that they had to change the way that they thought because they were directly impacted by it. So you guys just going out and doing research and seeing what's going on versus the people that have been directly affected by this and then decided to wake up, I think is a far better way to be informed about things that are going on. Myself, I'm very fortunate. I had a grandfather which at a young age taught me that if there's anything that I question it, go find my own answers. Don't just believe what anybody tells me because most people are full of shit and they don't know and they just want to tell you something because they want to act smart. So if you stick to your own roots and you stick for your own research, question everything, go with what you think is right, then you're ultimately going to be a free-thinking individual. You'll be able to make smarter decisions about everything in life, and ultimately you'll get out of it, you'll be able to have better inner peace and be able to make it through anything. But back to the isolationism within the whole gray state idea. Once the gray state comes, after the police state, that's going to be a huge awakening. For myself, looking into events like 9/11 and other different events, understanding that the media is all psychological warfare, and that was hard to kind of handle. It even shook me a little bit, even though I'm used to questioning everything in my entire life. Do you think that there's going to be a big repercussion within the people once they are forced to take this red pill and understand that all the crazies and tinfoil hat guys out there actually trying to warn about this upcoming events were right?
That's an interesting question.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to anticipate, like I said, these people who have entirely useless skill sets and are entirely helpless to the world at large, or what they're going to do when they wake up. But in the end, everyone does have their own free thought and their free will, whether they choose to exercise it or not. So that is up to them. All we're doing is presenting the consequences. And it's interesting that you said psychological warfare with the media, because there's almost comfort in that, because once you realize that TV releases these beta waves, that puts you into a beta wave sleep state, releasing endorphins, so it becomes an addiction, and you're essentially asleep, you're not thinking. And who doesn't like taking a nap or just getting an endorphin rush every now and then? I mean, it's almost not your fault, but once you wake up, it's comforting to know that it wasn't your fault that you've been so stupid all along. So yes, it definitely is psychological warfare.
I completely agree, and once you break out of that state, that's when it becomes really, I guess, surreal.
Oh, the world is so much more colorful since you're awake. I mean, every day, I mean, you can appreciate every moment. I mean, you drink a glass of water, and instead of just, whatever, I'm slamming it back, you're appreciating it, you're expecting what it's going to do to nourish your body, and everything becomes so much more real once you're aware of it and attuned to it. And free thought is a beautiful thing.
I think even more interactions with human beings become much more significant, and you really take the time as a person to try to get to know that person instead of just having surface conversations. and whatnot, and which is really ironic because of being in the entertainment business.
Yeah, right.
You know,
It's like
Ooh,
we're making a movie still.
Yep, exactly.
We're just gonna make a film, try to make some money.
Yeah,
Whatever.
and so it really is. So I think one of the increased benefits of it is just how much more, I guess, my relationships with other people, some of my close friends and my family have just really kind of really spawned and much more deeper and rooted with that. And that's one of the best things with it. But yeah, no, I mean, everything, you're always constantly bombarded from all sorts of ways, electromagnetic field waves and everything from your cell phones, television, when we're just simply walking around.
These things, like you mentioned, the electromagnetic sphere around the Earth. I mean, I have no idea what that means. But what I'm not going to do is project my insecurities into the matter and say it can exist because I can't explain it. What you can't do is start to assume. I mean, it is not only extremely remiss, it is arrogant to assume that our sphere of understanding of the world will persist into the future or even into the next couple days. Who knows? To close your mind off from any possibilities that the world may offer is to close off your own free thought. And so, yeah, I mean, how I like to think of it is the shadow consistently proves the sunshine. You find out what the media, what the establishment is trying to attack, and that's probably what you should be valuing. You know, if they're trying to persuade you into thinking that a little girl on the side of the road selling lemonade is a toxic hazard or a terrorist threat, that's probably a good indicator that you should probably think the other direction. Right. So what they're doing is they're making interpersonal communication a transaction. It's no longer communication. I mean, even me, I grew up in this society. I'm just as susceptible as anyone else. I have a conversation with someone, and I can tell they're alert and they're looking at me and they're thinking. I'm scared by that. You know, like I don't know how to respond because I'd rather just make it a transaction, go about my day, so I don't have to, deal with that level of consciousness almost.
Well put. No, I'm sorry. That was just. I think even going with that, I think David brought up a really good point. I mean, if there's a little girl selling lemonade, trying to make other people happy.
Could you elaborate about that story? Most people probably haven't even heard about that.
Well, I think it was in Washington.
It's several stories.
Yeah, I mean, it's all locations. I was going to bring up the other thing about a woman who was growing in Michigan who had a garden, and she was going to go to jail for a felony for growing a garden.
And InfoWars, Alex Jones just released a story where the guy who was selling pasteurized milk, he didn't even sell it. He was the delivery man. He was arrested and thrown in prison for like 8 days or something and tortured. He wasn't given food or water, and he had to like sleep in sewage. This is a milkman. So you see that they're attacking gardens. Why? Because you're self-sustaining. You don't depend on the establishment, the system. Why are they attacking lemonade stands? Well, who knows about that one? It's just they're bullying a population into assuming that they must respect the authority. They're not civil servants. They're not public servants. They are authorities, and we need to obey them.
And the Amish. We've talked about this before. They are dangerous people. They are.
They are dangerous people.
They are totally dangerous people. And like when a lot of that story started breaking, when I would talk to people, discuss it with them, they would just it was like, roll right past them. I was like, really? You don't really see how crazy it really is. And you meet a lot more of those people. But it's interesting because now you're meeting more people who are like, yeah, this isn't right. Or like, people are starting to become very concerned about the trends and whatnot. And it's definitely where, they are scrambling and they don't want you to be self-sufficient whatsoever. Trust the government, trust the state.
Even friggin' Castro, during the Cuban economic crisis, because we did the embargo on them, he encouraged his people, make every spot of land on this island arable. Put some food in the ground and make your own food, and they flourished. Mm-hmm. That's communist Cuba doing that. And so why are they doing the opposite here? Why are they encouraging us not to farm? Why are they telling us to relegate all of our food production services, the entire infrastructure, to a few key companies, the heads of whom are in Obama's cabinet?
I mean, seriously, and one of them being Bill Gates, who owns who bought 500,000 shares of Monsanto. I mean, come on, and look what Bill Gates, he's an advocate for the vaccines. He's going to solve the problems with Africa. I mean, it's absolutely ludicrous. I mean, they created this system. They did. All the third world countries, and I'm not going to go preachy.
They're experiments, is what they are.
They totally are. Just like, perfect example, the Native Americans in the United States. That's another wonderful example of just an experiment of the police state, of stripping somebody of their culture. Peace, really relatively. They were more willing to work with people, but
don't piss them off because they're going to fight.
Yeah.
And I fought in Iraq. I mean, not to sidetrack too much, but I fought in Iraq. I do not blame those people for shooting at me. I recently spoke to a veteran friend of mine, and he gave this account. He's like, I was in a field, and the guy shot at me with an RPG, so I shot him back. Fuck him. But I was walking around in his country with explosives, so fuck me. Where is the right answer? Where is the morality here? And that's essentially one of the questions that Great State will address.
Yeah.
You brought up Bill Gates. Bill Gates is a huge advocate for eugenics. His kind of end goal to control the benefits for the world are to reduce the population. A lot of the same ideas that were passed through the early 20s and 30s through Nazi Germany with controlling economies by controlling the rate of people growth and controlling who can or can't live. So being that you've looked into, eugenics ideas and different things here, how is controlling the population, ideal for the elites?
It's slavery. Absolutely, because it won't fight back. And that's the biggest thing.
Greatest fallacy. It is the greatest flaw of the American people to assume that these things cannot exist. To assume that the people who are in charge of them do not have their best interests at heart. To assume that those people will not engage in these crazy schemes, even though history is totally cyclical. Everyone knows that, except for us, because we think that this is totally a sustainable society, and my way of life will sustain itself into the future, and I have nothing to worry about. The fact that we believe that is ludicrous and laughable. The system is not sustainable. So to assume that eugenics does not exist, that Bill Gates is not, he's not using his resources to push a vaccine that will give 1 million children autism this year. Why can't it exist? You prove it to me. I've got the facts. You prove it to me that it's not true.
I totally agree. It's like what Bobby Kennedy said. People say why, and I say why not. I think that's a huge thing. And what people also forget about the eugenics is that you can go through the archives, film archives, about a dozen propaganda films during the 30s, before, and then that was transferred to Nazi Germany, and it's all interconnected. And that's the biggest thing. It takes a long time to really kind of wrap your head around that. And then same thing what happened, right after, you look at that, it's like terrible. And even with the war crimes that the Japanese, military leaders did, what did the United States do? It's fine, don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it.
It's okay.
Go back to sleep.
Exactly.
For your protection.
Exactly.
We've got countries that have turned into superpowers that haven't even been acknowledged for war crimes throughout the last century, especially.
Yeah.
I mean,
what are the numbers? Well, you probably know the numbers. How many were killed by governments? What's the term?
Genocide.
Autocide?
No.
Democide, is it?
Democide?
How many are killed by governments versus how many were killed by eccentric dictators throughout the, authentic, legitimate governments? I'm going to come to your country and spread democracy through napalm,
Yeah.
How many are killed by governments waging their moral wars supported by their people versus lunatics, versus cancer even?
You get into that fact as well, and looking back through the power of religions through the history of the Crusades, every other religious, occult out there. Nowadays, instead of religious wars, they're using government wars in the promotion of freedom and democracy.
Well, absolutely. I mean, look at what Stalin did. Support the state that caused 60 million people die in war camps.
Well, we witnessed the same cycle in Rome. What they did is they introduced a pluralistic society where they brought in essentially all they had far outreach and stuff. They had a lot of people to please and bring together. So you raise them all to equal legitimacy, and then none of them have any legitimacy. That's called that's pluralism, essentially. The same thing has happened in modern society. So, it's the land of the free. You can believe what you want, but just keep it at home, keep it in private, and it can't dominate your life. It can't go to work. It can't go to school. And so you have like 2 or 3 or 4 generations growing up with this mindset. Of course, they don't really believe their religions, but it's almost like their reality that they live in now, fed to by the corporation's establishment. It's almost their religion, where they will believe it without questioning it, but on the surface level, where there is no spiritual understanding. They didn't exercise their free thought and come to these conclusions. I have nothing against any religion, but just to follow it blindly without having chosen to do so, utilizing your own free will, that is a mistake. And that is what is wrong with the government as well, because we're following it with the same religious zealotry. So I would disagree that it's a government war. I think that's still a religious war. They're just playing these ideas that people have. They're playing them off each other.
Yeah, it's like bipartisan politics in this country.
Be scared of Muslims.
thing.
They're different. They abuse their women. Whatever. That's why we should go over there and spread depleted uranium all over their cities.
Why is depleted uranium not good for people?
Why aren't the TSA body scanners dangerous? You go to the dentist and they put a lead jacket on you, and then they go behind a lead-lined wall. Why isn't this happening in the airports?
And then you have some poor fool who thinks he's doing a good job. He's standing there for 8 hours.
Push the button, he's going to stew in that stuff. The radiation.
And then we're molesting 5-year-old kids in the same time.
At the same time, yeah.
Yeah, and like 9-year-old women. I mean, it's...
That's the area where I draw the line. I don't mind. I'm an adult. I understand the protocol. I understand I opt out of the cancer machines when I have to fly. And you know what? If they want to feel violated and try to rub me down, that's fine. I'll just stand there and moo. But that's where I draw the line, is when they decide that your children could be a threat, or your elderly grandmother, or your disabled, veteran coming through the airport with his appendages missing, and they have to lift him out of the wheelchair. I mean, when has it gone too far when our own men that we send overseas to fight for our wars, when they come back, they have to go through and be violated?
Well, I don't think that they should be held to any different standard than everyone else, personally. But that standard is still pretty fucked up. I mean, the worst thing is, yeah, the kids, don't grope my kids, but also don't make my kids stand there and watch me get groped. I don't want my kid growing up used to the image of her father being helpless to the state for no other reason. I'm not a criminal. And I'm not a criminal. You're not going to grope me.
Yeah. And also to follow that, and also being used of just like that protective barrier and stuff, and being strong in oneself, where it's cool to have somebody come up and violate you at the same time. And they're saying like kids are, they could be a terrorist threat, but yet they're grooming kids to be dysfunctional through the vaccines and the training and the video games and all that. It's all one giant manipulation,
Everyone we've spoken to on this matter, at what point is the line drawn,
yeah.
like what you said? And largely the consensus is, don't fuck with my guns, don't fuck with my kids. And that is everyone's, that is a primary right of humanity. I'm a living, sentient being. I have the right to defend myself. It doesn't matter what society I'm in. I have the right, if my rights are violated as defined by the Constitution, whether or not the Constitution exists, I still have the right to defend myself.
And going off that, and I completely agree that everybody has the right to have their own weapons to defend. I with the training on my martial arts, when I train people in hand-to-hand combat, it's a form of killing people. So it's the same thing as taking a person with a gun. People have that right. They need that right. It's just ingrained in human nature. It's just nature in general, So it's
the greatest success of the New World Order to convince us that we don't need to defend ourselves.
Yeah.
Reports on InfoWars talking about a third grader getting her lunch taken because they said it wasn't meeting their criteria because it wasn't coming from their processed food plants. I mean, it's already crossed the lines in so many areas, but I still try to figure out why people can still be asleep to what's going on and not feel that moral obligation to do something about it, or at least get researched.
This is a 4-hour topic of conversation that's 100 years in the making. Essentially, when you have 3 generations of education, of children growing up under the education system, that they're, it's basically Skinner's psychology method versus, what's called Skinner's box. It's operant conditioning and workforce training, and Hegelian dialectic theory, essentially. So children are raised to respect their authorities and only their authorities. My wife is getting her master's in public health right now at the U of M. She tells me how these idiot students with their ideas, a product of this society, will convene on the matter because they're the authorities. We need to come to a consensus about what to do about this problem. This is how fluoride is put in the water. Well, in one study, it's good for teeth. So let's mass medicate all of America on those grounds without any looks at fluoride.
Yeah.
I'd like to cut it one quick here. Little note here is recent reports last fall, county in San Francisco, just south of San Francisco, Santa Clara County, they were trying to push through the budget bill. I believe this was on InfoWars as well, trying to push through the budget bill to get the county to spend $3 million to put fluoride in their water. They're convincing the taxpayers that it's so good for you that you need to pay us to put this toxin within.
Why don't they make prisoners on death row pay for their own execution?
Yeah. I mean, and basically it's just killing you slowly.
But
it's
convincing you it's for the greater good.
Even though it costs us. It's interesting because it's coming more in the open. Like, no, this is good for you. And also, I think it's Sacramento. I know that it was in Southern California where they're like, yeah, we're not getting enough rain, but guess what? We can manipulate the weather now to get more rain and stuff. And this is discussions about HAARP, and I've done years of research and going into it. It's a very real thing, and people don't realize that, even on the psychological manipulation of the human brain and the alpha delta waves on it. But now there's just no big deal, right in the open, about what they can do and manipulations on that.
Well, you're taught not to appreciate that you are a biorhythmic organism.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you live on this earth. Whatever the earth is doing, you're susceptible to it. And whether or not you believe that is irrelevant. I mean, the fact is that you don't believe it, not because it's not true, but because you choose not to.
Yeah.
Because you're taught not to. I can't live in a world where I'm affected by solar flares. I can't do that, because then I'm not, you know, an individual American.
No.
I'm not the rugged individual who can, you know, all these fallacies that are forced upon us.
Which is crazy, because you're not affected by solar flares. You're not affected by electromagnetic storms or anything like that. You know what I mean?
So the idea that a system of antennas can resonate at such a frequency that'll alter my biorhythmic thought patterns or whatever. I'm not a scientist, I don't know, but I'm not going to preclude that possibility. Yeah. I'm going to, you know, it could be true. Who am I to say that it's not true?
I mean, I'm not a scientist. I didn't study this. I just researched it on my own, and this is just what resonates as truth for me. So it could be wrong.
I mean, HAARP does exist. We know that.
Yeah.
And what is it for, if not to punch holes in the atmosphere? I mean, you tell me what it's for. It was in 2008, the Sichuan line in China or whatever had like 300 earthquakes in a matter of like 12 hours, all at the same depth. How does that happen? How does that happen? Over an entire fault line, you know, or over the entire world maybe, I don't remember, but they're looking at the US Geological Survey's website, where they have like, in the past 3 hours, earthquakes here, when that's never happened before, and it's all at the same exact depth.
You cut back to another report on InfoWars. They were doing media releases about testing drilling at certain depths in Mexico City, not too far back. And sure enough, as they were doing for the simulated drill for an earthquake, there happened to be an earthquake at the exact same time. So too many similarities with all these weather manipulation and modification machines that we're using. When we look into the Go ahead.
Totally. I'm totally going to jump all over this one. I'm totally going to, man. It's preparation. Look what happened in Norway. What was it, not even 40 hours before that whole entire Norway incident? They were staging the exact same drill. 9/11, the same thing. It's all. But once you start finding that, whenever you start seeing that they're training for something, patterns, and that's all it is, because they just repeat patterns. They're creatures of habits and conditions themselves. You know, and you can start to pick that up. Even dealing with like the earthquake in like Virginia and Washington D.C., and then also very closely in like Denver, Colorado, and stuff. So, and then Wisconsin, about that one, that's incredible.
Not here, no.
That would never
It never
happen.
happened. It didn't happen.
It didn't.
It's not important.
These aren't the droids you're looking for.
Right. But the people still eat it up and believe it is true.
Because it's coming from an authority figure, a guy who wears a tie, and he's got a microphone with his station label on it, and he's official, and he's got his expensive camera there.
How's that different
He's the
from
guy
me?
who's telling
I'm
the
an
truth.
actor. You know, how's that different? All the people, I mean, we're all actors.
Back to issues we were talking about. David, I want to touch point on this. You're a veteran with which branch of the military?
Army.
With the Army. And when did you get into the Army?
I actually signed up when I was 17 through the delayed entry program, and I finished my senior year of high school, and I left that summer. So I signed up in 2003, left 2004, and I was in until late 2009.
Being overseas and not really understanding what you're fighting for, I mean, you had the hero integrity, wanted to go out, serve your country as you felt it was your duty to do so. If you received literature or information talking about the truths of, say, 9/11 or different events that happened, do you think that would have been a distraction or a help for your services while overseas?
Like what I said before about attacking someone's religion, meaning the system by which they define their existence, it is that immediate knee-jerk denial. I remember coming out of a theater at some point and having the 9/11 truthers outside, you know, waving their signs and stuff, and I was just furious. I was that guy for a while. I was the one who would not open my eyes, because that would attack the reason for which I joined the military and the reason for which I was at war, and that would mean I would have to understand that I was wrong. So it is an encouraging story to hear that veterans soldiers are awake to these things, and we see that manifesting in things like Ron Paul getting most of the veteran and military support, which is something you can't ignore. I mean, you can't send people to war under a president they don't support, you know, and they never did. You can't look at a veteran and say, you're not for this war, you're not going to vote for Romney or Obama, you're anti-American, when he's the one going out to fight.
nowadays we see, InfoWars and many other websites are talking about the Obama youth camps to where they're, training our youth to get ready for.
How is that not Hitler's brown shirts again?
Thank you. Exactly. It's terrible. It's a carbon copy. That's all it is.
Nazi Hitler youth?
Same thing.
How is
That's
it
all
not
it is.
that? We need a citizen army, equally trained, equally well-funded. Holy fuck, you're going to give a bunch of kids $800 billion a year to do what exactly on the home front? I would like this explained to me.
Become spies, basically, in the same time. So, and just to go off what David said about, people, veterans and soldiers who are waking up to it too, who aren't going to, defend or stand by president on that thing, that's okay, because he has NATO. So he doesn't need the U.S. military anymore. Stuff. I was just going to reject that. Sorry. No, but David's absolutely right in a lot of things. It's been very eye-opening from him sharing his stories and his personal experience. Because for me, being a civilian, I've been completely sheltered to that life.
So back to being a veteran that served overseas and went through the training within the military to basically do as you're told, not question authority. Did you find that it is more difficult going through those trainings to be able to come back and then wake up and take the red pill?
To be in the military, take the Asian model, they have an extreme proclivity for combat. Unchallenged in history, right? Do not fuck with the East, basically. But that model cannot be applied to the U.S. military because I joined expecting to survive and expecting to get out and get my benefits and go on with my life. That is the wrong way to join the military, because to sustain a combat-ready unit, you need people who will immediately obey you, immediately, without question. You need those people, and that's combat. Yes, that is absolutely essential for training. It is not very good for free thinking. So there is a divide. That's what service should be. I'm going to turn off my brain for a couple of years and go serve the country. Unfortunately, that's just being twisted and manipulated.
Would you say it's safe to kind of assume that with the more awareness with our troops, it means that we're getting more information over to them about things that are going on our soil?
I think they can see these things for themselves. Eventually, it becomes a question of morality. Like, eventually you have to grow up. These things can't be hidden. So yes, it's in part people who understand pushing information to them, waking them up, approaching them. That's very important. But also just world events. I mean, at some point you have to, after you just shot this woman dead in the street, you have to look at that and say, well, maybe that's not the best thing. Maybe I'm not here fighting for your freedoms. There's a disconnect there. And like I said earlier, you can believe that or not, but the veil is becoming thinner. And if you want to believe the illusion, you have to support that illusion. You have to feed it, which is what the establishment is doing. By, don't pay attention to this. You're a hero. I'm the White House. I have the power to declare you a war hero. You're not a criminal. And I'm not saying that I'm not going to defend war criminals, or I'm not going to call everyone a war criminal. But if you engaged in hostile warfare and you didn't exercise your best judgment, like countless times I was told to fire on people, and I made my own conscious choice, and I did not, because I decided in my own head that they were not a threat to me at the time, and they were not combatants. If you act outside of those bounds, you're probably a bad soldier, but at least your conscience is clear, and you're a free-thinking person.
Could I get your opinion on Bradley Manning and when you first heard about him?
I don't remember when I first heard about him, but if I were in similar circumstances, I probably would have acted the same, but with much less trepidation, because I would have stumbled right into that trap. I wouldn't have appreciated that there was such a windfall of experiences waiting for me should I speak out. And what you're seeing is that they're attacking the whistleblowers. They're attacking the people who report the things that are going wrong, and they imprison those people. I mean, that's dictatorship. And I didn't know it at the time when the old Bradley Manning thing came out. And if I were in the same position, I wouldn't have known it.
To you, is he committing treason or is he a hero?
If you define treason by committing treasonous acts toward the government or toward your constitution, to your country, it depends on a matter of allegiance. So if he exposed war crimes by his staff or by the government at large, the CIA or whatever, who's your allegiance to? I mean, these are the same grounds by which veterans who engage in hostile combat against the oppressive government in the future, in the Second American Revolution, this is the same grounds they're going to be judged on. They are terrorists, they are insurgents essentially, but to a oppressive dictatorship, not to the American people.
I want to ask you too, Danny. your history, you've done a lot of training and research into martial arts and understand a lot of hand-to-hand combat and different techniques as well. When you were being trained and learning these things, what was the most important obstacle you had to understand about the attacking versus defending?
The biggest thing would be to really understand, to kind of incorporate, I'll quote Bruce Lee, to understand the art of fighting without fighting, to first use your head, ultimately, before you actually have to go engage in combat. I study two disciplines, one being Jeet Kune Do and also Kung Fu, which are two very separate. One's more of a physical discipline, hard knock. The other one's more spiritual, energy work, and blended into both. It was really mind-changing, and going to and trying to give people the understanding with that too. It's also going back to what we discussed earlier about critical thinking, because it really is to understand that, because in essence you're on to get to the point where you take a human life. It's a very intimate moment. Literally, that's the best way I can describe it. Dealing with that hand-to-hand combat and making that decision, like where David talked about, I'm not going to shoot in this person because they proposed a threat. I'd rather get myself out of that situation on the critical thinking aspect on it, and that's one of the largest scopes. And so it's just people don't have that ability, that on and off switch, to really engage in it. And that's going back to the whole entire programming with them, and to really kind of deprogram. And then when you do it, it's like dealing with a 5-year-old kid, because everything becomes like wonderful and creative. And this is before even getting into a long discussion about the energy applications before it, and by how we're all just biochemical components, and we affect each other's reality and stuff. And I'll keep that as a minimal discussion, because I can go on tangents about that. So I think it's a very, where he shares his stories about I can relate my own situations of dealing with, engaging with combat and whatnot. But thankfully, I've been able to get myself out of those situations more often by just discussing, talking to the person about that in a very simplistic form and stuff, but also being able to allow that person to actually see what is actually taking place from outside perception, if that makes sense. But it's been, at the same time, growing up, when I was being taught this Eastern philosophy, this is when I was still being heavily indoctrinated into the Catholic mindset. So you have two very composing opposites institutions, one would say. But it was probably the best thing too, because I just more became in tune to the Eastern standpoint and the understanding and philosophy of it. One of the biggest things what really taught me was working on inner strength and inner self-reflection. So during the dark times when I'd be questioning my own reality, spiritualism, who I was, I'd be able to turn to that and find that base. And that's what I really try to teach with people, because if you have that base, and then you can take everything that we're doing with Grace State, the spiritualism, the critical reasoning, just a whole entire world universe that we really kind of created through this, and really kind of put it in some form of context.
So you bring it more as a life transformation and accepting a different way of thinking, feeling, acting, and living versus just learning a skill.
Look, I can teach a monkey to kill. It's not that hard. You can teach anybody. But if you can teach that person to be able to apply to all avenues of their life to make them a better human being for existence of the rest of the human race, then you've really done something. And that, for me, that's the ultimate reward as a person, and that's something I'd like to do to the point when I have kids, to be able to pass that down generation to generation, because how much it's helped me for who I am, and this place in this life, a generation where men aren't men anymore, and the gender roles have been completely switched.
During both of you guys' research, I'd like to touch a little bit on like the occult and the elites and different obligations which we as just citizens should be more aware about, what these hierarchies are believing upon us with their ideas for us, like the Ikism, where they see different perception on reality and what's going on. Danny, you've been very researched on the occult. What could you share with me about their perception upon the servants, called the lower class, everybody that's not within the top 300, the top guys?
How much time do you have?
Well, we're gonna, a couple minutes here, but edit it down here to something good.
It is they very much subscribe to an ancient belief, going all the way back to Babylonian mysticism. That's a simpler context, and that's through dealing with Babylonian, also Egyptian, and it all ties together. And it's very neutral. And once you realize there's a light, there's a dark, and those are always constantly in flux. And their intentions, or whatever they are being manipulated from, either interdimensional or extra-dimensional beings, what have you. There's a difference between those two, but I won't go into that.
This is a morass of information that many people have made careers out of, so it's not something we can elaborate on in a few minutes.
Yeah.
But I like how Alex Jones puts it, in that it doesn't matter what you believe, and it really doesn't matter what's true. It's what matters is that they believe it, and that's what they're doing. So yes, you can find these terms like they're Kabbalists, they do these things in these upper echelons of government and stuff, and yes. What is the Washington Monument? You know, it's a big phallic, you know, they're like channeling power into it, or I don't know what they're doing with it. Washington, D.C. is laid out like a pentagram with the head, the goat's head, at the White House. What do these things mean? I don't know. Does it matter? Well, when it starts to surface in your physical world, then it certainly does. That's where the gray state occurs, when there's a blending of one side versus the other. Where you have to appreciate that maybe there's someone on the other side who's really, really real about what they're doing, and I have to appreciate that and understand that and address those concerns. So the whole occult thing, that's not a conversation we will willingly engage in, because we can't prove or disprove it, really. We have our own beliefs on the matter, but it's not our best interest or even, you know, general interest to try to prove that, because we can't. All we can do is speculate.
Building off that here, the ones that control the world, like they're known as the top 300 at the Bilderbergs and these different groups, they kind of all pyramid down with their ideas and their schemes through every channel that they control: media, government, and banking. In your opinion, do you feel that they have a very high responsibility to maintain their order and their ideas?
That's one of the instances I'm talking about, where it is a gray state, where one world does blend with the other, because those are our leaders, and we do have proof that Obama and Hillary Clinton attended the Bilderberg meeting. We know the Bilderbergs exist. We know that. Before they didn't. Now it's coming out as just, oh, it's normal, whatever. But that's an instance where the two worlds do blend, and we see very tangible things happening within our sphere of reality that start to influence us. For example, our country, our national leaders meeting with international leaders to discuss policy in private. Do they have a responsibility? If they're not answering to us, then no, they don't. That is the problem. Obviously, he's violating the Logan Act, Obama, by attending a Bilderberg meeting or presiding at the UN Security Council. These are criminal actions. These are treasonous. They need to be addressed, because American policy cannot be discussed in private with international leaders. That's a fact. And if he doesn't want to play by those rules, that means we have the responsibility to oust him.
Absolutely, it's a conflict of interest, and that's the simplest form. If they're discussing, you know, policies and enacting those policies within the country without we electing these officials, and that's why we have Congress for the best interest in these state representatives. And if that's what's really happening, then, you know, and that's simplistically, without going into discussing about like the CFR and the Trilateral Commission and how that infiltrates all the rest of like the educational and corporate whores.
It's like the New World Order fan club, right?
Yeah, and even discussing about, you know, we're talking about Bilderbergs and Bohemian Grove and all that stuff. I mean, it's just, there's so much time, and there's so much topics that we just don't have enough time to go into on it.
All that we know is that people do go to Bohemian Grove.
And the question is why? Why do they go? What's going on? That's all we want to know, and we have the right to know that.
Because these people are accountable to us.
Yeah, exactly. These are the most powerful people in the world. I mean, they control the smallest, like the most wealth in it. And we don't have the right, but yet we get stricken for asking questions, just simple questions that everybody has a right to know.
Right now we're in a state of where the ones that are making the laws and controlling the shots have no accountability.
Well, that's the biggest thing, and they don't at all. Nobody. I mean, Obama has no accountability whatsoever.
That is the essence of the gray state, physicality. Yeah. That is gray state, is when all liberties are being stripped away because we're not holding our leaders accountable.
And the biggest thing, too, is that the accountability also lies on you and us. And that's the biggest thing, but people don't want to take accountability for themselves.
Would you agree that the best way to stop this upcoming gray state would be to let the leaders know that there is accountability?
It is the nature of evil to run when confronted. And you have to understand that a system that wants to kill like 3 or 4 billion people on the planet, that's probably evil. I can probably safely assert that that's an evil thing that needs to be resisted, and it is my realm of responsibility to resist that.
And also, at the same time, I think that what David said about evil will run when, being
because in essence, they're weak. They're weak. They depend on your cooperation and your submission.
And
they depend on you to cooperate with the system. Otherwise, it has no power.
Absolutely, and also the other thing too I'm going to add too is that it's going to disguise itself another way. So you have to be consciously, engaged on that, almost on a daily basis. It's your duty. It's your goddamn duty.
Well, it affects you. If you don't, you will be killed.
Yeah.
I mean, it comes down to that. If you don't care about that, then at least do it for your kids.
Yeah.
So step 1 to prevent the gray state, get informed. Step 2, get active. Right. Step 3, pray that it works. Or what? I mean, how are we going to stop this gray state from coming?
Active, it's like the underpants gnomes. Get underpants, ? Make money. What is that active stage, right? The active stage is not preparing, like stockpiling food and just having this isolationist mentality that I'm just going to go ride it out somewhere. I'm going to stockpile weapons and I'm going to wait for someone bigger than me to say it's time to bring the weapons out. Those are responses and maybe legitimate. I can't foresee at this point, but that's not what we're advocating here.
No.
To be active, yes, it is grassroots. Well, while we still have a semblance of these rights, or we still have at least a facsimile of these rights to look at and act on, if we collectively do so, I think by just a collective non-compliance with what is going on, I think that is the solution, because we can peacefully protest this. We can peacefully reform the system.
We can change it. I mean, hey man, we're all riders of the storm, So basically it comes onto you. You stand now or kneel forever. And basically, and it falls into your shoulders. And you have to become an individual first. You have to find yourself first, and then you can actually present, your strength to the cause.
I personally would rather die on my feet than live on my knees. Do you feel that, you guys as in the movie industry, that this is your contribution to trying to prevent the gray state by putting out the gray state to try to help wake people up to what is upcoming?
It's as legitimate an effort as any other, I think. It's a narrative film. It's meant to entertain and first and foremost. But if people, like any good film, that sticks to your ribs like a good meal afterward, and you're thinking about it and you kind of digest it, hopefully you'll come out of that with some truths that are contradictory to what you typically believe.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that if I'm not going to compare to what we're trying to do into like the movie business at all. I think if anything, it's taken a sharp right from that. Really, what we're trying to do, because it's literally walking to the lion's den with this. And
Kubrick was killed. For doing this kind of thing.
I mean, you know what I mean. And we kind of know going into it, but it's like we have to. It's becoming much more of the internal strength and the inner strength to it. So
I do want to comment on it's a typically held American belief that I'm going to die on my feet, then live on my knees. But the reality of it is Americans are not prepared for, say, 70 years of guerrilla warfare. It's an act of endurance that we're simply not prepared for. So before we get to that point where our inequities will be revealed to us very violently, let's try the peace option first.
Absolutely.
Very well done. Very well said. Reason why I'm so interested in this whole gray state idea and what you guys are doing is because myself as an activist, my yearning is to be the change I wish to see in the world and try to change people to get at least to the point of being open-minded and seeing things that they might not have seen before. And if I can have any help in impacting that, I feel that I'm accomplishing some things. So by my helping with you guys trying to get this gray state idea, something that is more of a mental preparation for waking yourself and being at peace with yourself, more of a philosophy change. I feel that this is the project, The Gray State, is ultimately helping in the entire truth movement, as it's giving us motivation, saying that, look, these guys are staying on the road to get this movie out and to share it with people. This is going to happen, as well as making it into a movie where it's going to be entertaining. So I commend you guys and thank you guys for your services, what you're doing just in this idea. The question I want to ask you is, I've asked a lot of people this same question that are in entertainment business. If it gets to a point where you're going to either lose your position or your ability to be in entertainment business, or stick with providing truth to the people? Which one's going to happen first? Are you going to stick with getting truth out, or are you going to try to just maintain in the movie business if they come by and say, we're going to give you $10 million for this movie idea, but you're going to cut this part out?
That's a good question, and that is why Gray State has always been an independent project, meaning no studio interference will occur. So if we have to take a big cut in budget because we have to seek our own funding, so be it, because these ideas cannot be contaminated by corporate interests.
And it cannot be, influenced by suits. And
some suit comes in and says, change this, and then we're good. Then the theater is, then it becomes mass palatable.
And then we just sold ourselves down the river of what we're trying to do. And then we just got recycled through the whole entire industry, And I don't want somebody like, here's $10 million, we're going to take this and it's going to sit on a shelf. What the fuck? It doesn't do anything. And everything that we worked so hard and slaved over, and it just mentally, physically over, it's not worth it to this. I think we're at a point where it will be made regardless. How it's going to be, we don't know yet. Those are the questions, and at this point, we're not, to the extent looking at those, but we know it will be made.
Every movie is an investment by the people who fund it, and so the very fact exists that if it were to be taken by a studio, everything would have to be changed. These are not palatable ideas.
Yeah.
These are not. It's not a summer thriller, and it's not a family feel-good. It doesn't exist anywhere in the typical genres you can go to a movie or the theater and see. So yes, things would have to change if it were to be in that category.
It's like a Walt Disney film on acid.
No, it isn't.
So there's going to be some skeptics out there that think that you guys are just trying to put together an idea to make a film to try to profit and make money about these ideas going on.
Is that not what every filmmaker does?
Right.
I have no obligation to anyone here. I'm just making a piece of art the way I see fit.
Yeah.
If you don't like it, cool.
That's fine.
Let's foster some debate here on the matter, but I'm not going to answer to anyone about the goals of my film. It's my art. It's mine.
Same thing as being a filmmaker and an actor. It's just a reflection of reality, and that's it. And I agree with David, not answering to anybody. And we're not out to be like, make sure we get your approval and you're okay with it and don't hate us. We're going to do what we're going to be set out to do.
We've made more enemies already.
Yeah, we totally have.
Doing this than.
And that's okay. You know why? Because they're talking about us. That's okay though, because it's still in the back of
Is
the
that
brain.
Fall Out Boy? I don't care if you talk bad about me as long as you're talking about me.
Let's not quote Fall Out Boy in this.
I don't know the guy's name. I forget.
Who cares?
It's a good quote.
So I can say, no matter what, that this Gray State idea is not going to be influenced by any exterior motivations. This is entirely your guys' project. You're doing all the story plotting, the research, everything at your disposal that you can possibly put into it.
We have total creative control
Yeah.
of the project, so we will at no point approach an investor who wants to change that.
And it's going to be made by people believing in the project. And this is where the marketing grassroots, and this is what we're doing here right now with you and stuff.
That's where the gold of the project is, because now you know us and you know what we stand for, and that's going to shine through in the film. So if you believe in what we're talking about, that's what the film's going to be about.
Yeah.
So uncorrupted means that it's coming from this source.
All right, so we know about what Gray State is. We know what is coming. We know that this is happening. There's facts all over the web, everywhere about this happening here. Where can people look up and find information about Gray State movie?
Well, to look at the Gray State, you just have to look out your window. But if you want to find information on the movie, it's www.graystatemovie.com. Our YouTube channel is youtube.com/user/graystatemovie, I believe. And we have a Facebook page at facebook.com/graystatemovie. Stay tuned, it's coming.
Yeah.
So hopefully we can get this movie done before it's just pretty much recording live TV out there.
Yeah, it's kind of creepy. It's starting to turn like
We're chasing reality, but we're doing our best.
We feel like we kind of joke around and say we made a mockumentary. Makes sense sometimes.
Well, he says that.